Good evening, folks. We are live and we caught Tasha right in the middle of some typing there, trying to finish up. Yeah, she wasn't expecting me to, put her on like that. Sorry, Tosh.
That's all right.
But welcome. Welcome to the Joko folks this Thursday evening. I'm Brother Youssef, member of the Joko. Happy to be with you. A cultural worker, poet, professor, scholar of cultural studies, um, emphasis on the Black arts movement, other cultural movements, cultural wings of the global proletarian revolution and the land back demand. So, anyway, I am joined by my partner and comrade, Tasha. Hi, Tasha.
Hi, Yusuf, and greetings, everybody. Um, Welcome to back to Joko Conversations, and per usual, it is our wish to add to the, um, to the our drop, put our drop in the good stream um, of constructive, accurate, useful, provocative information and ideas. And with whatever we put out this evening, may it be useful. May it be, may it help someone to further their own thinking, um, raise some questions, validate some insights and musings, all of those things. We always put in the forefront our gratitude for the individual genetic lineages that we come in on, a way of acknowledging the our foremothers and forefathers and foreparents of all genders who have had their hand and extended their energies to our developments, whose energies and souls impressed us in these ways that some of which we'll never remember, but that have made us the people that we are, um, upright and making the choices that we make to be a part of the world's liberation struggle, to be a part of the struggle for justice, peace, um, appropriate distribution of accumulated wealth, and all of the other markers that, um, the ideal nation is defined by and known by and spoken of in these days. We always forefront and bring to our minds the those ancestors in the African family, whose names, some of which we know, some of whose names we will never know, but through whose cleverness, ingenuity, uh, courage, insight, daring, creativity, all of those fabulous human qualities, um, have helped to push the envelope and help to resist the onslaught of extraction and predation and tyranny and all of those things that the um, planet has been suffering from on a, you know, recognizably, measurably unprecedented scale. Um, and there have been people in all human tribes that have applied their energies toward righting the world, and we keep those folk in the forefront. We salute those folk on the other side of the veil, as it were, and we always acknowledge that any liberation that we do as Afro descendant people, we do at the hospitality of the First Nations people of what some of them call Turtle Island and their ancestors, um, all of whom, all of those who were similarly involved in this quest for liberation, for sovereignty, for cultural preservation, for um, all of the things that make human life good that we've come to understand as human beings, the things that make human life good, the ethical core that gives us peace and bliss, right? And abundance and joy and all of those things. And so we start that way. Um, every time we come on and just and put those things in place. That's ours is the as the people like to say these days, our grounding exercise, our grounding moments. And with that being said, we've been talking about um, culture and uh, how culture reflects the resurgence and uh, resurgence of reactionary values, how culture is used to um, counter reactionary values, and then how or be insurgent toward those reactionary values, how culture is deployed again um, to be counterinsurgent, um, and again uplift and attempt to reinforce these reactionary values um, that have a span and a spectrum. So we're looking tonight at consumer culture, right? And that value of extraction, the value of what do you call it? It's very hard for me to, I confuse myself when I put it in the same sentence with value, but it's definitely held dear, right? The capacity to find ways to extract labor and resources and,
Mhm.
right? And to accumulate and hoard and wield that accumulation and hoarding um, as an instrument of power and all of the kinds of excesses and mental and emotional and social ills that relationship leads to, right? All the relationships, the uh, relationships of all kinds of disparities that that leads to. So what does consumer culture have to do with it? What is consumer culture? And anywhere we'd like to start the discussion, our good brother Yusuf.
Well, we'll start there, right? Because you've laid it out, right? The ubiquity and even necessity um, for consumption because of the way the economy is built around it, right? And you know, the 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 article you shared with me, a brief history of consumer culture, right? And let's give the writer some due. Karen Higgs.
Yeah, I put it in the. You can post it. I think you can post it. I put it in the comments. You see it?
There we
Yeah.
go. Yes. Um, and that, and the article, makes clear using the the builders, right, of the system. Um, that consumption, you know, is at the entire, it's like the heart, right, of the beating heart of the system, right? They have to,
Mm,
and because people don't necessarily on their own or didn't
mm-hmm.
on their own, you know, constantly consume, right? Look for. commodities that they didn't necessarily need.
Mm-hmm.
And so, needed to this habit, right, of mind and emotion, right, had to be cultivated, right, cultured.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The and it's in some ways you've got all of these I don't want to say accidents, right, because that's not, but these various factors coming together, right, at this particular time, and probably even fueling this this um, this notion of the changing, the transforming, capitalist relations, right, or
Mm-hmm.
capitalist engine,
Mm-hmm.
as now we're moving out of, we've been long out of mercantilist capitalism, right,
Mm-hmm.
which is introducing these commodities that become somewhat generalized, right, sugar, tobacco in that particular way, right, and with the alcohols and shit, the gingham cloth, those various things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the goods coming off the plantation, right? The things
Mm-hmm.
that are relying on the plantation. Um, that and of course, the mercantilist trade in human beings, right? Mercantilist capitalism, right? Enslavement capitalism, and colonial capitalism, right? That primitive accumulation into industrial capitalism, and the writer Benedict Anderson, in his discussions of the development of the European nation state, talks about the role of print capitalism, right, and the importance of of now print culture, right, that emerges in the 17th century after Gutenberg.
Mm-hmm.
The But again, along these capitalist terms, which means what? Private ownership, and for profit. I mean, basic fundamentals, right? Private ownership, for profit. the And then the kind of the entire late 18th century, 19th century struggle for a freer humanity, right? The bourgeois revolution of the late 18th century and into the 19th century, like the revolution of 1848 in Europe, and of course you've got all the Haitian Revolution is a revolution, for liberty, to expand the franchise in a particular way, right? This breaking away from the old monarchies, or the old empires. Um, I don't. It seems oxymoronic to call to say the American Revolution because it was such a conservative thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Doc, I like Dr. Horn's framing of a counter revolution, um, to be able to maintain slavery longer because they could see what was coming, right? And certainly in the British Empire, slavery was outlawed, in the slave trade, a transatlantic trade in human beings outlawed earlier, right? So all these changes, right, includes and including this growing demand for democratization of power. So that by the time you get, so we're hitting the 20th century, and the post U.S. Civil War, um, industrializing, Germany, England, France, etc. The U.S. of course becoming, more industrial, particularly after World War, or rather after the U.S. Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've got the capacity to overproduce, and they're not going to, they don't have the principles, right? Capitalism, as they say, right? As the theorists of capitalism are saying, at that time, early 20th century, 100 years ago, give or take, um, as the article lays out, that for them, capitalism means constant growth. And for that constant growth, you got to be, you
Mm-hmm.
overproduce, which
Mm-hmm.
means you need, consumers to consume, right? You need the masses to consume.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the ability to consume, to buy what might have been considered luxuries, and right, and again, was typically the kinds of commodities that the most affluent parts of society bought. I like the way the article puts it.
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
the point is, the democratization of
Mm-hmm.
consumption,
Mm-hmm.
democratization of these luxury availability of these luxury items
Mm-hmm.
is what's promoted,
Mm-hmm.
engineered, instead of democratization of power, or
Yes.
democratization of, or of the distribution of wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Under the pressure of the growing um,
Yes.
democratic demand, right? As the
Mm-hmm.
the emergence of universal suffrage, including for women, and in some cases, including for the colonial subjects who might be in the hinterland, or rather in the metropole, um, and increasing that demand, right? Uh, and the demands of labor, and the example of a socialist revolution in the Soviet Union, right, and the overthrow of the Tsarist empire, and the socialist alternative. So consumers had to be made, right, had to be
Mm-hmm.
constructed,
Mm-hmm.
and so they said, and
Mm-hmm.
with no or with no thought, or ignoring the thought of
Mm-hmm.
what the consequences of overconsumption
Yes.
might be,
Mm-hmm.
or over indebtedness, what over indebtedness might mean,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because how does the working class, the barely working class, the
Mm-hmm.
lower middle class, the middle class, whatever, right,
Right.
afford anything, um, you know, credit
Credit.
for, or what was it, the installment plan,
Right.
in earlier days,
Yeah.
layaway,
Debt facilities. I like the
mhm,
term. Various debt
debt facility,
facilities.
yes,
Mm-hmm. In
yeah,
order to do that. And just to insert, one of the things that quite impressed me, and understanding this is well known, but is still quite impressive to me, um, is the clarity, as you just said, um, without thought, and then said, well, or ignoring the thought that, because one of the things that the article develops really well as it represents these conversations,
hmm,
among the economists of the time, right? The economists uh, uh, of the 20s, and the early 20th century, the late 19th
hmm,
and whatnot, as they're looking at this precipice of creating this consumer, um, um, citizen, this
hmm,
um, person, and even to be in a position to have that kind of ideation, right? Of some kind of social molding, of course, with the influence of the Bernays, of the time, the to conceptualize how to um, shape a mass psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and to conceptualize the mass, a psychology of masses,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and to sit up and meditate on how to manipulate, that psychology. So the calculation with which, the enduring calculation with which, and absolute clarity with which this model was put together,
Mm-hmm.
quite consciously and deliberately inculcated as a, a, a cultural norm, as as a cultural piece, as a moray of some kind,
Mm-hmm.
consumption as a moray, um, in various ways, but um, in it, and in and of itself, that uh, that this probably best encapsulated in that American dream model,
Mm-hmm.
with the, as they talk about, the onslaught. I was going to say onslaught came to my mouth, of
Mm-hmm.
urbanization and the creation of this new economy, this new middle class, these consumers, and this uh, kind of illusion of social mobility, this kind of
Mm-hmm.
illusion organized around the capacity to have access to these luxury items that you were just talking
Mm-hmm.
about. Luxury,
Mm-hmm.
luxury items that previously uh, hoarded and or let's say, um, but basically, just possessed by the only the elites, that there is this opportunity to even increase the wealth and actually increase this disparity based on exploiting the this very, emotion based drive for a sense of social advancement, a sense of,
Mm-hmm.
or a sense of status advancement. Let me not use
Mm-hmm.
the term social advancement. Let me use the term status advancement, um, and to feel oneself in that it's enduring. It's
And to
enduring.
feel that, right? Because it isn't real, right?
Yes.
It is not actually a
Mm.
social or status advancement,
Mm.
but it doesn't have to be because it only has to feel like it and sort of be, the kind of social acknowledgement, right, of even the ability, even if everybody knows that neither one of us
Yeah.
can truly afford this or
Yeah.
live at the status or
Yeah.
have the status that these purchases, would indicate, right, or imply, want to imply.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was a really fascinating part of the article, right? That this
Yes.
the way in which consumption patterns are encouraged or that they play on,
Yes.
right, exploit the desire for higher status, right, and that
Yes.
human need for recognition,
Yes.
and recognition that exists in this hierarchical, you know,
Yes.
conception, right, of human worth.
Yes. 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 And so, yeah, so the appetite for that also is increased
Right.
as the consumer culture, it
Mm-hmm.
reproduces itself. The appetite,
Mm-hmm.
the taste, the palate reproduces itself. I'm going to read a little excerpt from the article that speaks to this. A Vance Packard.
Hold
uh,
on. Hold on before you begin reading it,
okay.
because I think I can put it on the screen at the same time you're reading if you give me a minute.
Okay.
Um, I think so. Let me see. Let me present. Let's see. Share screen. Okay. Where? Okay. Let's see if I can share screen.
Okay.
Oh, what happened? Okay, there we go. All right. If I can share screen the way I want. Right now, no, not. What if I go here? No, no. Okay, I don't seem to be able to do it. It's not coming up as the option. What if I do that? And now if I try that, okay, you'll let me know if it shares.
Okay. Let me go.
Okay, yeah, yeah, it went away, but I
Let me.
think it'll. I'm trying. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody's patience.
Enjoy. Play. Play.
Okay, here that it'll.
Ooh, we have an echo effect. No. Okay.
Did it work?
Well, yes, the article is on the screen.
Okay, but I'm
Oh,
not.
we can start with this is a great piece right here. We can
Okay,
read this part. Just talking. Ooh, don't move.
okay.
Let's read what's on the screen first before we find the quote that I was about the excerpt, which is a quote that I was about to read because it very much speaks to the time period, to this crossroad, and
Mm-hmm.
to this period of choice, as you're talking about looking at the experiment and the exercise of socialism and the Soviet Union and the reaction to that experiment, the
Mm-hmm.
turning away from it. So it says one of the discussions that these folks are having. It'd be nice if it was big enough to be seen because I can't say who was saying it, but that's all right. What's being said is that it would be feasible. Okay, and you can scroll up a bit.
This way.
No,
This
down
way.
then. Yeah, a little bit. I'm trying to get that
Oh,
block
this right
in the
here.
middle. Yeah. It would be feasible to reduce hours of work and release workers for the pleasurable activities of free time with families and communities, but business did not support such a trajectory.
And this is
So,
already the 1920s they're talking about, right?
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, right? So,
Yeah.
what I was about to read, you'd be looking for the phrase that begins Vance Packard echoes, both Bernays.
Vance Packard echoes both
Bernays and the
Bernays
consumption economists of the
right there.
1920s. You got it? Okay.
Yes, 'cause this is what we're going to talk about, right? Yes.
So this is a Vance Packard, right? Um, saying what is the Bernays, let's call it the Bernaysian mode, right? Um, and the consumption economists of the 1920s, just in itself, the consumption economists of the
Mm-hmm.
1920s, in his description of the role of the advertising men of the 1950s. They want to put some sizzle into their messages by stirring up our status consciousness. Many of the products they are trying to sell have in the past been confined to a quote unquote quality market. The products have been the luxuries of the upper classes. The game is to make them the necessities of all classes. This is done by dangling the products before non upper class people as status symbols of a higher class. By striving to buy the product, say wall to wall carpeting on installment, the consumer is made to feel he is upgrading himself socially. So that was just the,
Yeah,
you know,
and let's
quote.
see. Do we know when Vance Packard was writing that?
Um, apparently it is like post 50s. It sounds like it's
Vance Packard's
that
writing
he's
at that
an
time.
academic or something. I believe so, just based on
Okay.
what I just read.
Yeah.
I took this excerpt, I copied and pasted that little piece.
Hmm.
I don't see what's around it. I'm not seeing what's around it. But there, there is the concept, there it is, how to,
So it is status that is being sold. It is
yeah,
endless material objects that are being consumed.
yes,
Yes.
yes, yes,
Yes.
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 And
And
go on. Yeah.
well, that role, both the role of the radio,
Yep.
the television set, right?
Yeah.
Um, these, mass media
Yeah.
formats.
Yeah.
And that's what I was getting to earlier, right? All these things coming together kind of at once, right? Sort of the productive capacity, the overproduction, and the emergence of electronic media that can reach a mass market market on a scale that hadn't been seen before, right? There was already the mass media, which again is one of the reasons Benedict Anderson can speak of print capitalism, because that's the mass media of the
Mm,
19th century, right? The many newspapers, right? Editions coming out
mhm,
multiple times a day.
mhm,
Unions having their own papers, etc. Right, along with the
mhm,
market in books,
mhm,
but
mhm,
particularly though,
mhm,
journalism, those
mhm,
kinds of periodicals that begin to emerge, um,
mhm,
18th century, but especially the 19th century. The and now and even sort of the public culture, right, that begins to be developed in the 19th century. This era of mass entertainment, right?
mhm,
The traveling shows, the
mhm.
minstrel shows here in the
Menstrual
United
clothes, as a
States,
matter of
right?
fact. Right.
Um,
Mhm.
the circus traveling Europe,
Hmm.
the emergence of the museum as a public space, right? No longer the purview
Mhm.
of royalty
Yes.
and nobility with their private, zoos
Yes.
and parks,
Yes.
and closet of oddities, right? But
Yes.
now the public museum and the public zoo and the public park and the
Mhm.
development
Mhm.
of modern sports, and again specifically, CLR James talks about this. The Now you're seeing that because I'm sharing. I'm going to stop sharing screen. We can go back to it. The CLR James talks about in his book on cricket, right? What is it? Beyond the Boundary, I think. His book on cricket, right? And
Mhm.
he talks about,
Mhm.
he has a little passage on the development of soccer, late 1700s,
Mhm.
while cricket's being developed. As you have these, this is when at the beginning of industrialization, and work patterns are changing, right? You're getting a working class who now might have some free time on Sunday, and how are they going to spend their free time? And we can't have them spending their free time in bars or whatnot, or organizing. So here's these games that can be developed where the energies of the working class, right, can be worked out in contest.
Wow. Yeah.
So even the
Yeah.
modern sports as they've developed, right, world football, aka soccer, rugby, baseball as it emerges in the United States, eventually the invention of basketball. I don't know, football, North American football. I'm not sure when exactly hockey, was invented, and golf, right? Golf, an elite sport, in many
Mhm.
ways, right? So
Mhm.
anyway, um,
Mhm. Mhm.
these things coming together, right? Kind of mass society coming together in the new capitalist arrangement of things, right? As it
Mhm.
really begins to take a
Mature.
fundamental, recognizable shape, as we
Right.
come into the 19th century,
Right. Right.
and now this electronic media, right? That
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
can reach so many in
Yes.
so little time, as the article
Yes.
discusses, right? The introduction of radio.
Which I want to read that excerpt as well. I don't. If you want to try to find it or flip.
Oh, I can. I
Um,
remember where it is. We'll just go back to it.
okay. Um, I'm. Yeah, you probably know which one I'm going to read. Um,
Uh, Hold
can I
on.
go ahead?
Are you? Am I sharing screen?
Let me see, because I'm
No.
actually looking at my excerpt. No.
Now I am. So radio, right?
Mm-hmm.
Electrification was. Let's see.
It's not.
I think it's a little further up. Although I thought this was interesting too, right? The
Um,
prospect
not
where
sharing screen.
the non-settler. I'm not sharing screen. I'm
No,
not. I see it sharing. That's weird. Okay, you're
I
not
don't see
seeing
it
my.
shared.
Okay, let me try again. And just keep trying. Now, what do you see?
I don't see the
I keep.
document.
It's
Why
funny
don't
because I.
you go ahead and do that? Let me just read this excerpt
Yeah,
because I
go
think
ahead.
it's different and it's all right. So while we're still in like kind of the theme of what um
Yeah, go ahead and read the excerpt.
part of this, right? In between, like in terms of this culture creation, and we've spent time talking about um the symbolic universe, or the no the med was it the mediated environment or the symbolic environment, right? Culture is the symbolic environment, and um how this kind of the way this science of advertising,
Yeah.
this artifice and science of advertising
Yeah.
begins to, create the symbolic environment so much, right? Um, and as these, the print media, and then as these other media gain, uh, begin to establish themselves and expand, et cetera, et cetera. So the comment that they make here, requiring no significant degree of literacy on the
Mm-hmm.
part of its audience, Ewan writes, and she's quoting whomever she's quoting, radio gave interested corporations unprecedented access to the inner sanctums of the public mind. The advent of television greatly magnified the potential impact of advertisers' messages, exploiting image and symbol far more adeptly than print and radio had been able to do. The stage was set for the democratization of luxury on a scale hitherto unimagined, right? And so, like, one of the features of, just in terms of like the image and symbol, image, the saturation, being able to saturate the image field, and as we're always talking about kind of what the meaning of post literacy is
Mm-hmm.
culturally, and how it affects folks' ability to critically assess information. And then you have, like, what is the conversation? So much of the conversation about the device culture and the phone culture, and the TikTok culture and the social media culture, is what it does for to attention
Mm-hmm.
span. You know what I mean? So just deeper and deeper kind of into the cognitive sphere, into the cognitive piece. So I just wanted to read that part because it seemed to bridge um those areas, from
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know yeah, yeah, they're in your heads and they meant to get in there. They're in your head and they
So it's
meant
an
to get
interesting.
there.
Again, everything is full of contradictions. So this as this is happening, right? And as Ewan writes, and I can see for some reason my computer is not allowing me to share, and there's something I'm supposed to click if I want it to happen, and I have no idea what
Temperamental. Go
what
ahead.
it is, right? So. I'm not going to worry about it. The but it's interesting that at this very moment, when, as Ewan put it, and I did find it, um, requiring no significant degree of literacy on the part of its audience, it's
Mm-hmm.
also the time that public education is expanding,
Hmm.
right? And literacy is, in fact, becoming more widespread
Hmm.
during this same moment, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
as I say, contradictions, they're
Mm-hmm.
always there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and literacy would continue to grow, right, through the 20th century. As we know, public education, and certainly public education in the industrialized, colonizing countries and settler colonies,
Mm.
um, made great leaps forward, right, for people in
Right.
terms of developing that critical thinking,
Right.
um,
Mm-hmm.
such that public education, remained under attack from elites, right, and the value of it, because they certainly have always seen it as a threat, right? Again, so the democratization of education
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
beyond kind of training for workers, right? To and even the it's been remarked many times before, right? The design of the modern classroom,
Mm-hmm.
it designed it institutionally in the form of the factory, right? And
Right.
to prepare workers, to give them the minimal that they would need, right? Hence
Uh,
the sixth grade education, the eighth grade education that was common, right, for a long time, especially in rural areas.
mm-hmm.
So it's just an interesting, just notice that interesting contradiction, right? At the very moment, um, a a medium is developed and deployed in a way that that might even seek to replace literacy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's also the moment
Mm-hmm.
that public schooling is expanding literacy, or at least attempting to, right? And I think it,
Mm-hmm.
relative to, well, with literacy, going up, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Succeed.
and then that repeats with television, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Although
Yeah.
television again has that advantage of being able to deploy images.
Right. 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 Um, entertainment. Entertainment impact, maybe entertainment force, that kind of thing. The ability to demand attention in a different kind of a way, or
And
demand.
colonize the imagination in a particular way, right?
Uh
To
huh.
visualize
Uh
something
huh.
and repeat that visualization, over
Yes.
and over
Mm-hmm.
again, and so that
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a common sense.
Mm-hmm.
And there's already the visual media very
Yes.
powerful of film, right? That's been around.
Yes. Yes.
That other like mass media, electronic
Yes.
mass media, right?
Yes.
Or mass medium, I guess in this case. Uh,
Yes. Removing the middleman in terms of the televisions, the radios, the televisions, really the television coming into home, and television in every room, and all of these kinds of things. Um,
and right, also being something that has to be consumed, right? So both the
yes,
radio and the television have to be sold, right,
exactly. And
and
in a
continue to
way,
sell each other, right?
right, right. Um, in a way that going to the movie theater, though film was accessible, going to movies somewhat accessible,
And relatively
across
cheap,
classes,
compared to other forms, right?
yes, even reduces the middleman of having to earn that nickel, and having to and having to, all the different things, the time that it took to get to the product of consumption, which also would be, if not rarefied, not constant, not a
Right.
constant diet. of that kind of entertainment, that kind of you know uh, attention, and mental absorption and emotional absorption, that kind of conditioning. Um, so you're just transformed by the ability to have the monitor in the house and have that programming.
Right.
But
Um,
yeah, and also, yeah,
it
please
also
say
gives the
more.
audience some agency, though, in a way, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
um, you can turn the TV off, you can turn the channel,
Uh-huh.
you can get up and go to the bathroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
you eventually learn. People eventually learn the rhythm of commercials, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is really the whole point. The U.S. model, right? The privately owned, corporately owned medium networks that have products to sell, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
really, again, our attention.
Mm-hmm.
The corporations are buying our attention
Mm-hmm.
from the networks, right?
Mm-hmm.
To sponsor the things that make us want to watch. Um,
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Um,
and so it changes that so there ends up being this different kind of experience, right? Because television early on is marketed in that way, a theater in the home, except it's not the theater experience. You
right.
aren't sitting in the dark
Right. Yeah.
with a larger than life screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a screen
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
being constructed in a way to fit into
Mm-hmm.
your home, right? To match
Yes.
the furniture in a particular way, right? The
Yeah.
decor, the
And now the screen
and that different kind of
person.
emotional psychological experience
Yeah.
of that comes with sitting in a dark theater in a
Yeah.
crowd but alone in that crowd, right? That the
Yeah.
darkness kind of
Creates. Right.
encourages, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and that, I mean, you can get up if your body demands it, right? Or but you're more or less stuck there, right? From
Yeah.
beginning to end, if you don't want to miss anything. They're
Mm-hmm.
no,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so anyway, so they end up being so even though it's marketed as theater in the home, it becomes something different, right? A different way
Right.
of viewing,
Right.
that they study, right? To
Right. Becomes an object of study. And before you go on, because so you have a little bit more to put it with that,
no,
just to insert. So now the screen is incorporated into our person.
mm-hmm.
We literally can carry that with us on our person, have access to it
It's there. It's being put in
at
the
any time.
glasses in
And
some cases,
in some cases, right?
or you
So,
can you can find those, right? So,
uh-huh. Um, so a whole different level
a
of
whole different level.
integration
Mm-hmm.
with the mediating
Mm-hmm.
agent, a whole
Mm-hmm.
different level of integration, that begins to not getting, just popped in my mind just to say, but would tend toward, you know, um, less and less distinction between the mediating agent and the self, the person, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of um, one of the things that's seen that's totally unsourced, totally un anything. It's just a piece, to see these, these uh uh the way entertainment is collapsing into the person, over
Mm-hmm.
you know from the external social distanced, in space and time, all these kinds of things, to this now constant companion. And as you're saying, even into the level of the glasses where there's this why that would be appealing, I don't know. But there's also now, there's the
Well,
opportunity
because it's cool, right?
because it's cool.
Right, or it's
Cool because
or
it's cool, neat,
it's
yeah,
it
novel,
right. It's not exactly right. It's new.
novel,
It's novel. It's
right,
another
newness,
what's the word
man,
I'm looking for? Sort of
yeah,
of or another kind of military level technology
uh-huh,
like this internet,
yeah,
like the television and the radio that are developed for government and military purposes before they become objects of mass consumption. Um, and that often, right, the
yeah,
is being imagined
yeah,
or informing different kinds of storytelling.
mm-hmm,
So we've
mm-hmm,
seen it, right? We've seen it in movies, right? The
mm-hmm,
spy or whatever who puts on the glasses and gets information, right? That
mm-hmm,
they can read. Um,
mm-hmm,
there was some talk some time ago, right, of putting chips in people, right? So you could see
mm-hmm.
commercials in your dreams or whatever, or something
Oh,
madness.
really?
Yeah,
Interesting. That one I
there's
had
some
not heard.
madness like that.
In the
Um,
in the chips and people discourse, I hadn't heard that
yeah,
one.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, and coming from like a Wired magazine type,
uh-huh,
a tech world type, things of the
uh-huh,
imagination, right?
uh-huh,
Of the tech future and the transhuman future
uh-huh.
that some people imagine, or that has been imagined often in dystopian ways by lots of
Yeah.
writers like the cyberpunk writers.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's something to be said. Go ahead. Go ahead and finish.
no, go ahead.
Okay. Um, this whole piece about in terms of all of these kinds of debates that have gone on, I don't know what that sounded like concerning radio. But certainly with TV, certainly with internet, certainly with video games, certainly with cell
Mhm.
phone and IP, all those kinds
Movies.
of movies. But
Mhm.
talking about the discussions and concerns over the questions, is this healthy, and with not accusing anyone of being the immediate accusation, oh, you're a luddite, you're not moving with the times, you're not that sort of thing. But this kind of scrutiny, these scrutinies on the effects of these different kinds of things. And um doubtless there's an in and out, because just an in and an out, a back and a forth, a pro and a con, and all these kinds of um these aspects. Because yes, with the part of also what is we've seen be very valuable with social media has been the exposing of, for instance, the exposing of um uh exposing of the effects of imperial and colonial politic, with and the effects thereof, that with the kind of speed, and accessibility that it has. You can, if you're aware of it and you know where to get it, and you know what channel to turn to, you can hear from a breakthrough news, from an electronic intifada, from Black liberation media. You can hear from, what I'm saying. You can also hear from a number of other kinds of sources. But um really, I got myself on a tangent. What I wanted to uh get a little bit more into is that whole creation of that disembodied creation of common sense, so such that people are getting their everybody's watching the tube, though they're not watching each other in the same way, getting their information about each other and the world from what comes over these monitors, what comes through now the issue with the algorithm and the information bubbles and the what is it, post truth, and how that contributes to post truth kind of culture. um but yeah, the that generation of a common sense, what happens with that? What is happening with that, in your opinion, in this stage of device culture,
I, okay, so I don't know if I can answer that question.
media
If
culture?
we come, we'll
Whatever
see if
you
we can
think.
come around to an answer to that question. Because I'm thinking about what our title is, the culture industries and constructing consumers. We've been talking about the intentionality of constructing consumers, but we haven't talked about the culture industries really. Right? We've
Okay.
talked about some
Mhm.
we talked about technical media, right? Radio and television.
Mhm.
Um, but so what about the culture? So the television industry, I guess, right? What might
Mm.
in its role. Um,
Okay.
the well, it's all the various. So in terms of the various device culture, right? It's the ways in which people consume popular media or popular culture. I mean, what is popular culture? What are people consuming?
Mhm. Mhm.
Different kinds of stories, I guess, right? There's
Mhm.
the various kinds of series that people are watching either on television or on one of their devices, and
Mhm.
of course now we're streaming services, right?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, really just this next iteration um, of new devices, way of bringing television with you everywhere, right? That you aren't stuck at home with the television, but there was already a ubiquity of the television screen in bars, for example, right? Some types of restaurants, maybe. I thought one of the things I thought is, oh wow, there is no place else, right? Um,
Mhm.
there are nowhere to get away unless you really get away.
Mhm.
Um, and now you can't even do that. Is when they put screens in, video screens in cars.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, so first of all, the kids, all right, do they need more screen time?
Right.
Because that's part of how it was sold and pitched, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm like, and why does the driver need a screen
Right.
to look at, right?
Right.
This, it's all there. I was like, okay, so now you can bring video into your car. I myself, driving or not driving, riding on a bus, right? Bus travel. Um, a chartered bus when the college sent some folks up to Sacramento, right, for like for demonstrations of schools for public for funding,
Mhm.
and we got to watch a movie on the bus, right? Um,
Mhm.
and the buses in the travel buses in Mexico, I was like, oh, where you can actually buy a first, second, third class ticket for some of the buses, right? Got to watch a movie on the bus, right? So, but it was rare otherwise, right? To see a screen in your moving vehicle, and now so that was my
Right.
first like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
they're everywhere, right?
Mhm.
Then they
Mhm.
show up at gas stations, right? You can watch
Mhm.
the screen
Right.
at the gas station, and
Mhm.
then of course, as you were saying with the phone, or with the
Mhm.
various devices, smart,
Mhm.
excuse me, smartphones, tablets.
Hmm.
It's you can it's
Mhm.
always there, right? So you're
Mhm.
always we become a perpetual
Mhm. Mhm.
audience market, right? Um, because even within the content that's being sponsored, um, there's a way of life, right, that is being promoted, uh, propagated.
Yep.
Um, a representation of what normal people are,
Yes.
in some kind of way, and what things one needs. What are the accoutrements of
Yes.
normality?
Yes.
Um, you know, where one lives, what cars one may drive, etc. Right, and of
Mhm.
course, the companies that provide things, right? They're in the credits, right? You read the credits.
Mhm.
Vehicles provided by Ford, right, or
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So even that, right? Both, and we know, and again, I think it's a very good documentary.
Mhm.
Much of what
Mhm.
we read in this article, A Brief
Yes.
History of Consumer Culture,
Mhm.
is including some of the persons quoted are in that video. The 4-part documentary, Century of the Self.
Mhm.
Um, Makes it, and in that, in part one, right, we see how
Mhm.
old
Mhm.
product placement is in film,
Yes.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And the film industry,
Mhm.
um, with the crash of 1929, film is expensive, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And particularly film is expensive, right? Now you can
Mhm.
do it. There's digital and all that, but even that can be expensive. But
Mhm.
um, with the crash and of 29, and no money anywhere really. Um, finance capital, right? Finance capital is how movies got made, right? And finance capital is still, very much the economic engine of certainly of mainstream films in the United States, anyway.
Mhm. Mhm.
Which does not have a film institute like many other countries have, right? Or
Mhm.
something, or something, like a national film institute or board or something like that. Um,
Mhm.
you know, but again, the United States is committed to privatizing everything and everything private, and that's been the model, right? That's been the radio model,
Mhm.
the television model, as opposed to other countries, um, until the creation of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and national PBS and NPR, right? In the late 1960s, I believe. Right? Um,
Okay.
and
Mhm.
and again, like everything else public, and part of the reactionary backlash, always under attack, right?
Mhm.
And struggling for funding and having to argue, and a country that produces a great deal of art, and and art, well, and art is propaganda, but I do take the somewhat extreme position, in agreement with Dr. Du Bois, right? Dr. W.B. Du Bois. All art is propaganda. It's all propagating something, some vision
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
if you think of yourself as an apolitical artist, an aesthete, and art for art's sake,
Mhm.
and what is that, Metro Goldwyn Mayer's logo? The ones with the lion, isn't that Metro
Mhm.
Goldwyn Mayer?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Ars gratis ars.
Yes. Mhm.
That's a position, right? That's not apolitical, in my opinion,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, that is, just like abstaining in a vote, right? Isn't
Mhm.
as neutral as you may think, right?
Right. Right.
Abstention is in its effect a vote for whatever side wins.
Mhm. Mhm.
The So anyway, the devices, right? Going again, this elect the electronic forms of media that can make it so ubiquitous.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
you know, even to the point, I was about to say, most of us wouldn't want to just watch advertising.
Mhm.
Um, so we have these wonderful shows, right? And the wonderful artists often, right, who put together these shows. And of course, the material, the things that sneak through. I mean, there's all kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
Um, but we won't. I hesitated around the, would people, people wouldn't just watch commercials. They need content. But I was suddenly reminded. I remembered. Um, there have been shows that are the world's funniest commercials. So, a show about commercials with its own commercials sponsoring
Commercials.
it, right? And yes, because the commercials are often, quite witty, well well written, well acted,
Mhm. Entertaining.
beautifully. Sometimes,
Mhm.
seem to be higher quality than the show they're sponsoring.
Mhm.
That is not uncommon.
Mhm.
And of
Mhm.
course, our attention, the audience, local audiences, worldwide audiences, are so valued
Mm.
that we know, and
Yes.
the Super Bowl
Mhm.
companies pay millions of dollars for 30 seconds of our attention.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Think on that.
you know,
As how many and how, but and then to see also this question in terms of the disconnect between these forces at play and at play upon the masses and the masses capacity to recognize these forces at play,
yeah,
because even to to make that kind of that have that kind of description, make that kind of of statement, um for 30 seconds of your attention. 30 seconds of your attention is worth how many millions of dollars,
that's
right?
right.
And folks, will hear that and like, wow, yeah, they pay a lot for advertising or whatnot. But in terms of looking at the implications, really considering the implications of that, how can my attention be so valuable without, it being a, what is it, the matrix, without it being a matrix scape where you're
Mhm.
connected to, you're a battery fueling the,
Yeah,
piece, that it
right.
works in a very simple, straightforward, and actually highly resistible way. Literally, what happens if
Yes,
you turn your attention away, which
right.
is interesting too, because it has a lot of social implications. Um,
Hmm.
when you do turn your attention in different ways and toward different pieces than what is being than the mass experience, the mass common sense that's uh,
Yes,
being.
exactly. And that, so, those ways of life that we see in the various shows, whether they are
Yes,
scripted shows, and where the genre are all over the place, right?
yeah.
Um, but they're I often think of this article by the
Mm,
poet Randall Jarrell, "A Sad Heart at the Supermarket," and he wrote it in like the early 1960s. Um, and really, his I was a critique of the media, and his point in it is that, and he says it shouldn't be called the media; it should be called the medium, because it all speaks with one voice,
mm,
and that voice is
mm,
consume, right? That you
mm,
find your being in purchase and consumption,
mm.
rather than any kind of inward look, outward look engagement
Yes,
with your fellow, with
yes,
the the great things of the world that are still out there and
Yes.
happening. Um,
Yes.
so it's always, and again, as they're clear, as the theorists were clear about, as Bernays was clear about, these people
Mm,
did not believe in democracy, or they had a very narrow definition of democracy that was elite democracy, right?
mm-hmm.
Their version of the wise rulers of Plato's Republic. The and indeed really opposed a genuine democracy, and certainly opposed a distribution of the wealth created by those masses, right?
Hmm.
So in every, and they are clear about guiding the thinking, shaping the thinking,
Yes.
um, uh, making,
Yeah. Yeah.
setting,
Yeah.
what's possible in our imaginations.
Yes.
Um, so they've had 100 years of practice at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I teach um, the media and communications section in my first year composition class, one student had she was like, "Yeah, my father is in advertising,"
Mm-hmm.
and he said, "This is all true, everything,"
Well,
because
this is all true.
we watched Century of the Self,
Yeah.
right? He said, "Yeah," and
Yes.
my dad said, "This is all true." They are,
Hmm.
there's a constant kind of He was no longer in advertising, right?
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, I
Yeah.
said no. Yeah, they're always. So now I think a very interesting thing happened, right? That which you made me think about it when you read the section on the 1950s ad man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It put me, and this is the role of the culture industries.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, I thought of the 1960s ad men, and the popular, I think it was AMC series
Mm.
Mad Men, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
that take
Yeah.
us into the lives of the Madison Avenue men. Um,
Yes. Yes.
and in some ways heroize or anti-heroize,
Right.
their
Which is
experience.
heroizing. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, who in some ways should be studied and known better, because of the world that they
Right.
end up, creating
Yes.
in terms of our material
Absolutely.
existence, often
Right.
in some way,
Right.
in many ways. And we
Yes,
it's
sir.
in a period, and especially now, right, as I was talking about the literacy contradiction,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's certainly in the post 1960s
Mm-hmm.
that and certainly as we get into the 80s, right, that attack on public education really begins to take root, and we see illiteracy going up again.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
and these are the folks who are so instrumental in
Mm.
creating this kind of material experience that we have.
Yes.
um,
Yes. Yes.
this this unreality, right, and this
It's
unfreedom
unreality and
that
unfreedom.
people experience, right,
It's real.
that's so much characterizes um, life in the United States, which is itself like this advertising stuff, right? This PR, going back to the Europeans
Yeah.
selling the New World to each other,
To
right?
each
And the
other.
idea of the New World
Right.
and virgin territory and
Right.
empty land, even, and all
Right.
this, right? And
Right.
that being
Right.
sold.
Mm.
Um, so anyway, uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
radio. Well, yeah, radio, that also now becomes streaming, etc.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the music that people listen to, right, becomes a commodity to be sold, and the artists are marketed in a particular way, um, that they become brands, and the brands that they're associated with,
Yes.
feeds the consumption.
Yes.
Same
Yes.
with the movie artists, the film artists, the models, the all the the entire culture of celebrity, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
is marketed, right?
Yes.
Look like you were about to say something.
Well, yeah, just that it is not if you were finished. It's a not if
No,
you
go
want to
ahead.
finish. Go ahead. Um, Thinking about uh, you know, the statistics on depression and addiction and all of these kinds of things that speak to um, a certain a certain um, desperate attempt to fill a want and or sensations of emptiness, sensations of pointlessness, sensations of lack, trying
Hmm.
to describe that in terms that make sense but aren't attempting to be clinical, but some similarities. And there's not too many people that I know at this age and stage, and a lot of, people talk about that's part of the conversation about Gen Z and I guess the generation uh, before them or whatnot, the uh, increasing numbers for due to a number of all kinds of factors, um, depression and anxiety, among those. But I think that um, uh, there is an American epidemic, in those areas, and there's at least a comparison, at least a juxtaposition, to be drawn, in this all of this grasping to fill, and yet there's these kind of really harrowing senses of emptiness and
Yeah,
and
alienation, and
alienation.
uh,
Yeah.
that is what this, capitalist, late capitalist, imperialist society, post industrial society is producing, right? And it's part of what, again, folks are who are reactionary are reacting to, uh,
Mm-hmm.
looking to a mythical past,
Mm-hmm.
um, to try to fill those holes, that emptiness, and small towns are just as, filled with just as many alienated people and
Mm-hmm.
desperately poor people, and
Yes. Yes.
regardless of whatever the mythology is of the small American town, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the heartland and all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
But we aren't in the heartland, right? We are on the West Coast, sometimes called the best coast, other times called the left coast.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't
Mm-hmm.
quite left enough,
Mm-hmm.
really. Um,
Mm.
you know, not a small town though.
Not a small town. Not a small town. Um, but yeah, we that is definitely a thing in the culture in in various ways. The even the the pop psych self-help books,
Hmm. Yep.
the seeking of self, the seeking of
Yeah.
connection. That's it's a big
Yeah.
topic of
And at
con-
least since maybe even since the 1950s, right? Because what we're describing, right, has been, emergent since then, right? And um, already, for, I mean,
mm,
part of this is what's in the, what is animating a movie like, from the 1950s, like Rebel with a Cause, a Rebel Without a Cause, right?
mhm,
The what is it, aimless youth
mhm,
and
mhm,
all that, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm, mhm.
it's moribund, right? I mean, it's a moribund society continuing to, extract as much wealth as it can out of
Mhm,
people
mhm,
and the
mhm,
resources
mhm.
and
Yeah.
all that, right? Without um, certainly, maybe they didn't know or think about it. I don't know in the 1920s, but already in the 1960s, if not the 1950s, it was clear the price the planet would pay for this
Right.
overproduction and
Right.
overconsumption. It was already becoming
Absolutely
clear.
clear.
What is it? Silent Spring.
Yes.
That's the early '60s, I think that comes out, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Rachel,
Yeah. Yes.
you know
Rachel.
what I'm talking
Yes,
about.
I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm
So
just
that's already then, and what's his name? The
Rachel
German
Carson.
Rachel
Mhm,
Carson, yes.
mhm,
Um, Herbert Marcuse, is already contemplating this in um, the one-dimensional man, right?
hmm,
And it's um,
hmm.
that what we were already living in a world where everyone's needs, material needs, could be met, right? Production
Right.
had reached a point where no
Right.
one needed to live in abject poverty, right? Everyone's material needs could be met, but and also in this contradictory position where production was being um, driven forward by destruction, right? And in
Hmm,
terms of the production
hmm,
military
hmm,
commodities, right? Various kinds of military hardware and engineering, um,
mhm,
in the arms race and the space race
mhm,
and this sort of thing. Um,
mhm,
Believing though, workers, individuals, alienated um,
mhm,
in
mhm.
this, overproduced, overconsumption, maldistributed, system of
Yeah.
extraction and exploitation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I Dr. Jared Ball,
Mhm,
shout out to
mhm,
the myth and propaganda of Black buying power.
mhm.
Um, has pointed out multiple times that the pandemic showed us
Yes.
the you know what
Yes.
what consumers mean
Yes.
to the global economy.
Yes.
And that's when we have recessions, right? When
Right.
consumers like, I ain't got enough money to be consuming,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Mhm, mhm,
Um, so
mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, maybe I saw, maybe we should go ahead and do our
Yes.
update. Yeah. This, as we,
This is
just again, we live with the consequences of the overconsumption and any, in the world that should be emerging right out of this
can be, right.
completely unstable current world order, right?
Yeah.
Is both Europe, the collective West, the United States. Everything's unstable right now,
Mhm,
um, and a new world is emerging,
mhm,
and that new world is going to have to deal with
mhm, mhm,
consumption, and
mhm,
particularly in a place, say, like Africa,
mhm,
that still needs to be wired, right? To, and connected in particular ways, right? In terms of the building of infrastructure, and that one of the points made in the article, the in the non-European world where there is not a settler community,
Right.
underdevelopment, right, is
No, right. No market. Right.
no
It's
money.
not beneficial. Right.
Um, so now that's not going to be the case any longer.
Yeah.
Um, so this emerging world, right? What is consumption going to look like in this world, right? In the Africa of the future that is emerging now, the global South generally, right? What does consumption look like in China, which is
Yes.
the most productive company or country in the
Right.
world? Um, as since neoliberalism's trick backfired on them, right? Um, and they are now dependent on the number one manufacturing country in the world,
Mm-hmm.
China.
Mm-hmm.
So what does consumption look like there? And there was this one particular scene before, this little silly movie, the Karate Kid version with what's his name, Jaden Smith,
Yes. Yes.
and what's his other name, Jackie Chan.
Mm-hmm.
And early in the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what is it, Taraji P
Mm-hmm.
Henson plays the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And she wants to take a shower, and she's like, or she's checking the water in the apartment. She's like, "Where's where's the hot water? Right? Where's
Mm-hmm.
the hot water? It isn't."
Right.
And Jackie Chan's character comes over and flips one switch, then the
Yeah.
hot water comes on, and it's with that switch, and he,
Yeah.
makes the point of, we're trying to save the planet here, right? So, it says something about
Yes.
the way that society is trying to structure
Yes.
to be green, and that's something that's kind of underreported about China. They actually have been making
Mm.
moves in trying to create a green economy, a sustainable
Mm-hmm.
economy, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a model that is going on in lots of places in the global South, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what is
Mm-hmm.
consumption going to look like
Right.
going ahead? Um, Despite the complicity of contemporary Western culture industries, um, propaganda wing of the empire.
Mm-hmm. With people making new choices, people
Mm-hmm.
setting new courses, people
Mm-hmm.
uh, of the many peoples at
All
least.
the peoples of the world, right? People recognize this everywhere,
Yes,
right?
this is not the path.
This is
You
not the path, right?
know, these discourses
Exactly.
opening up about uh, discourses opening up about validating varied knowledge systems and so this decline of the worship of the West
Right.
and the blind worship of blind to all else,
Right.
this exalting of the Western way. Folks are taking up the taking up uh the work and the way, the road of imagining the world through a different lens, and that right there, that's the death knell. It's like we're not we don't need to consume every idea. We don't need to
Right.
know, the end
Or everything.
of the white supremacy. Every yeah,
I
the
mean, just that, what was it? It's been years now, and I think, when they first came out with, you don't have to wait until your iPhone contract is over. You can get your new iPhone. You can get a new iPhone every year,
crazy,
right?
crazy,
And and that was like,
right?
I mean, there it is, right? We got to keep pumping these iPhones out, and we got to
Yeah,
keep them buying, and then you can get a used iPhone, right? And so, all that. Um,
yeah,
so okay, we can close that discussion. We were trying to close it 10 minutes ago,
right. Yeah.
because we did want to do some kind of update
Well,
on what's
action was
happening or the
ending. Go ahead,
protest
do
in
your
LA.
thing.
Well,
Yeah.
no, that was it. That's just making that announcement. I mean, I know sort of the major news today is Well, first of all, let me say, this afternoon I went to my granddaughter's high school graduation, and it was wonderful. And on the way home,
Yes.
driving down Century, right, that part of Century that Century folks who may not know in Los Angeles, if you're watching this somewhere other than Los Angeles, or you've never
Mm-hmm.
been here, Century Boulevard, sort of the south end of the city, uh, uh, drives directly west, takes you to the LA airport, LAX, right, Los Angeles International Airport. And
Mm-hmm.
so, along that strip of, that section of Century, there are a lot of hotels,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as you might expect near an airport. And so passing the Westin today, I think it's still the Westin Hotel on Century, just a little west of La Cienega, there
Mm-hmm.
was a demonstration in front of the Westin, an anti-ICE, ICE get out of LA. What is the, it's been in its initials, GTFO LA,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, ICE GTFO LA, right?
Yes.
And then other,
Yep.
ICE get out, right? So there was a demonstration
Yes.
I passed today that was by one of the hotels by the airport. We only passed one hotel.
Yeah.
There might have been others going. Well, actually, we passed two. There was one at the Western,
Yes.
and we know there. I know there was. I saw earlier that there was an order to start raiding hotels, right, and other places where immigrants are
Mm-hmm.
thought to work. Um, and so there was a demonstration outside of that hotel, and a great deal of the story, as the right wing media for sure, the Trump and his surrogates, LA is burning and
Yeah.
this sort of thing, right?
Yes.
Where really we know everything is contained in downtown Los Angeles and has never really been, you know, uh, uh,
Yeah.
primarily violent, right? Whatever.
No. Mm-mm.
So this notion, so there's already an overstatement, right? There from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, there was an overstatement
Oh
of
God.
what's happening in LA, but people are
Yeah.
pissed and in the street for
Yeah.
sure. Right?
Yeah.
And to the best of my knowledge, that has continued. I haven't seen news about downtown today, but I just passed a demonstration a couple hours ago, right? So we know that, and they are focused on ICE, right? Um,
Yes.
as has the city and other local cities and county leadership, recognize, political leadership,
Yeah.
um, government leadership, recognizing the centrality of the immigrant community to this, to this economy, and then just to the everyday working of this
Right.
region,
Right.
and how many mixed families there are, right? And they're revoking papers. They don't care if you're legal at this
Yeah,
point, right?
which we knew. Yeah, go
Um,
ahead. Yeah.
so the other big things that happened, which I don't know if you know about the Senator Padilla thing. So
Yes, I do.
Christy Nome,
Yes, I
right,
do.
right,
Yes. Mhm.
and so a sitting senator,
Yes.
challenging the Homeland Security Secretary, but is
Yeah.
manhandled, right, by law enforcement,
Right.
FBI, I think it might be, or federal law enforcement,
Federal law enforcement. This is
pinned to the ground, treated. So again, which again indicates
yeah.
the split in the ruling class. But the other big thing is the judge, to whomever was looking at the state of California sued or
Right.
did a legal action.
Denied that.
The judge returned um, I don't know what to call it, a command of
Okay.
the California National Guard to Governor Newsom.
Oh,
So
okay.
as of 12 o'clock
Okay.
tomorrow, Governor Newsom is back in charge of the California
Okay.
And of course, the Trump administration is appealing or whatever.
Oh, you're right.
So that is, in terms, that's what's happened procedurally,
Yeah,
and
because that was happening today. There was prior the rejection of the restraining order
right,
request, but then the other judge heard another aspect, and yeah, ruled on another aspect today. Okay, yes, thank you. I was just ordering that in my mind. In my
right.
mind, yeah.
And then the other thing is just, I mean, there really isn't anything to update, right? Things, remain as they were. People are still protesting ICE, and here's a case where it is both people in the street
Mm-hmm.
and the local government, right? Yesterday there was a joint
Mm-hmm.
press conference, mayors of Los Angeles and the local cities. What was it? Mayor Governor Newsom, who pointed out that there are 88 cities in um, LA County. So several of the local mayors from the region, along with the mayor of LA and some various city council people from the region, um, making pointed comments in a joint press conference yesterday that ICE is not needed here, right? Um,
Yes.
and that the National Guard, the
Yeah.
Marines are not needed here.
Yeah.
And again, we already know
Ice is
the
the problem.
police,
The rest of them aren't needed. Yeah.
and they've already, again, they're using their usual military tactics in shooting at unarmed people, these, so-called non-lethal things. I'm
Rubberized
pretty sure it's gone
bullets.
viral. The Australian reporter
Yeah.
that was,
Got hit.
shot,
Yeah.
a couple other unarmed, folks. So, they're doing what they ordinarily do. Certainly don't need, the U.S. military to,
Yeah.
Exacerbate,
Yeah.
that. So anyway, I mean, that's really the update, right? People are, the protests continue. Um, and this is a case where, a significant, a significant number of the ruling class, right, or the of
Mm.
government officials are in agreement with the majority, I believe, of the people on the ground, whether they're at demonstrations or not. These ICE raids have no place here. They're and they are not improving the quality of life for anybody. They're ruining people's lives and are really an attack on you know the, this region.
Decency. Decency. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry. You were
No,
saying
no, that was it.
I
I was
blurted.
at the. I was actually at the end of that sentence. So.
Okay, but I didn't hear what you said because I
Oh,
blurted out
well,
decency
an attack on this region, right?
on this
Actual,
little region. Yeah.
an attack on this region, LA County. But again, to be expected in all of these various, as they say, they want to target the so-called blue cities and blue states,
Right.
or anywhere offering any form of resistance. Um, and so paint this picture, right? Has anything been burned since those cars a few
I
days
don't
ago?
think
I
so.
mean,
I think there's only three of them, three
and there were
Waymos
only three of them.
that I knew that I read of at the time.
Right.
You know, and they're just, whatever.
So
Egg,
yeah, so
you
well, that continue.
whatever.
That's why
It's
the
very,
protests are happening, because they
yeah,
continue. I just saw a news report. Federal agents swarm a home in Huntington Park.
it's
You need to
awful.
swarm a home for
Yeah, this is
in
awful.
military gear.
Just terrible. It's
It's
terrible.
terrible.
And
Um,
yeah, and it's just it's awful. It's awful. And none of these are like very articulate or descriptive or informative, but it's heartfelt. It's just it's head shaking. A few minutes ago, you were a couple of steps back, you were talking about the this isn't improving the quality of life. This isn't improving, this is not an improvement. This is destroying people's lives. And it's destroying, I mean, yes, people are doubling down. There's the chilling effect isn't
right.
working. It's people are warming up. It's like, oh really? Well, we're coming out. Oh, let's all come out.
Right.
The chilling
Exactly.
effect is not working. And yes, and also the the presence of brutality socially it's a social poison. It's a
Yeah.
social poison for the brutalized, of course, and most immediately, and most, but it's the as well as the witness and the bystander. Yay for those who come out of the bystander status and move to intervene in the brutality. You know what I'm saying? But it's a thing that creates is part of creating also this sick society. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it does that. It's something.
Mm-hmm.
It's another very important element of the sickness uh, in the society.
Mm-hmm.
Always the uh,
Yeah.
hmm,
And especially in this reactionary moment.
especially in this reactionary
You know,
moment.
it's they
Yeah,
they want this, right? They like
yeah,
watching it, and that's fine. I mean, whatever. You say don't give them what they want. Well, look, sometimes you got to meet them where they are. The
and well,
Because nobody, I mean, they continue to meet resistance, right? And people aren't backing down.
yeah, no, people are not backing down. People are not backing down. People are not going home, staying home, saying ooh, whatnot. Really, uh, really appreciating Carvalho, the
Hmm.
LAUSD, and the way he has continued to be stalwart and not hesitating to put his influence where his
Hmm.
mouth is and where his what I'm saying, with whatever he's got at his disposal, he's deploying it,
Hmm.
and doing it vocally. And um good, it's as yeah, it's as it should be. It's as it should be. So what can you say? Here it is.
So let me just close on this update with
Yeah.
just comment. There is a sentiment out there. I don't know how. I don't think it's very widespread.
Mm-hmm.
That somehow black people have nothing to do with this, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
even some of these folks are getting what they deserve. I don't. There are plenty of black folks out in the streets.
Yes. Yeah.
Also, and I'm not
Yes.
talking about immigrant black folks, right?
Yeah.
Necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Though them too. But
Mhm.
there are plenty of black folks who some people like to call FBAs,
Yeah.
though I myself don't embrace that term
Yeah.
at all,
Yeah.
who are out in solidarity and also
Yes.
for our own lives, because we know,
Yes. We understand.
we
Yeah.
have already been targets of this administration in particular ways, right? Um, and there are plenty of black folks out there in
Mhm.
solidarity. Um,
Mhm.
Join, and we know, just like the one of, I think she might have been a mayor from El Monte, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, made the point, and was an Asian Pacific Islander. And she
Mhm.
made the point, we know, if it seems like they're mostly going after, Latinx communities now, we know that we're on the list, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I did want to make that statement, right? That
Yeah.
regardless of what some folks might be saying or wishing or hoping,
Yeah.
there are plenty of black folks resisting ICE, and
Yeah.
also knowing that their cousins, they're married into families, right? This affects us,
Yeah.
um, and also it how much more clear does it have to be for people to know that the entire time, going back to Ronald Reagan, the entire time, make America great again always meant make America white again, which it has never been,
Ben. So
right?
all of this, the illusion, it actually takes us right back to our conversation about this creation of the consumer culture and the creation of the mythological world
Yep.
in which we
And
all
the
live.
ideal consumer.
and the ideal consumer, and the world in which that
Hmm.
ideal consumer lives,
Exactly.
this mythological universe, or mythological,
Hmm.
lack of a better term,
It is mythological. No, mythological is the proper term.
it is, yeah, it's partly
I
proper,
think,
but I
right?
don't mean all these connotations of, you know what I'm saying. Well, anyway, yeah, it is the proper term, isn't it? And the reproduction of this American exceptionalism story, that is, the white male supremacist, so, which is always a lie, always been a lie, and it's all, it's all
Hmm.
of this unreality, all of this unreality.
Yeah.
And, that bubble's got to burst. That bubble's got to burst. But all of this being said, at 9:15, we're looking forward to welcoming our comrade James Simmons on uh, special programming upcoming Sunday. Well, folks will circle back around into a much more in-depth discussion of this militarized moment, and well, not the
Yeah. No, it is a militarized
this
moment.
the militarization, right?
Yeah.
The this
There
it is
are
a militarized moment
somewhere, there are Marines that have been deployed to the city of Los Angeles,
to the city of Los
the
Angeles
empire's premier foreign fighting force.
force, and here they are, and
But then
it's
again,
more than a moment.
Los
That's why I
Angeles
wanted
is
to suck
often
that up.
treated like it's a foreign country in the United States.
Yes. And I
Uh,
wanted to suck it up because it's not, I don't want it moment to be something
mhm.
short or passing or temporary, as people are still, still having this conversation about, oh, can we make it through these 4 years, and oh, these kinds of, what I'm saying, the impact, this, here we are in at the militarization. So increased militarization. Anyway, we get to talk about it
We'll see.
with
I'm
James on
wondering,
Sunday.
I certainly assume that once he has, command again, um, Newsom will send the National Guard back wherever, back to their base or whatever. But what happens to the Marines?
What happens to Marines? Right.
Who are, I think
Right.
their mission was here to, protect the ICE agents or something like that.
Supposedly protect federal officers
So okay, we will,
from these
it,
mobs.
it continues to play out.
Hmm.
So we're going to see, and yeah, the militarization is here. It is with us, um, coming to a city near you
Hmm.
soon,
Hmm.
um, and a military parade to boot on Saturday.
Indeed.
Okay, so I have to share this, right? I know we're trying
Okay.
to get out of here, but I can't remember where I saw it yet, but somebody shared an ad, right? That was on Craigslist or something like that. They're looking for seat fillers. They're so you know how they're always talking about these are paid protesters or whatnot.
Right.
They're looking to pay seat
Wow.
fillers for the parade,
Wow.
and with a special incentive for people of color so that they can be, very, visibly,
You know what? I need a
because
few
it's a
extra
television
bucks.
show,
Let me
a
go and
deadly, deadly television show.
and just like the inauguration,
Oh, it's
it's
supposed to
hard.
rain too.
It's hard to get folks out. It's harder and harder to get folks
Yeah.
out to this stuff. So they're gonna make it like that is deep. We got to find that ad.
Yeah, yeah. I will. I can't remember right now what which YouTuber shared it, um, but I'll find it, and
Hmm.
yeah, I'll find it because I
Hmm.
watched it earlier today. This report that this.
Hmm.
No, actually, I think it was the I've Had It podcast.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, the I've Had It podcast.
Okay.
Um, Yeah,
Wow.
from today. They shared the ad, right? This
Wow.
and it, apparently it was like verified, right? As something coming
Yeah.
from these parade organizers or
Wow.
um,
Love
but
it.
it's all unpopular. The
Yeah.
dude got booed at the Kennedy
Kennedy
Center.
Center.
Just but do they care? Well, actually, he does because his ego is quite fragile. But
Mm-hmm.
then,
Mm-hmm.
um, anyway, we're not going to start another conversation because we're
No.
trying to say good night. Um, so, yeah, we will be back then Sunday, and we want to forget. We want to remind you. Forgot to remind you when we did our special thing last Sunday, to subscribe. Right? If you're First of all, thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching it on Facebook, if you watch it later, right, we appreciate it. Do subscribe. Do become one of our subscribers. I'll be hearing people talk about, hey, help us get to 500,000. Help us get to 200.
Yeah. Right
Help
on.
us get to 200.
Lovely. Right?
And
Yes.
please like.
Yeah. And
And
comment. And
and
comment.
comment. Yes.
When you hang out, participate, throw up some comments and all.
Yes.
So we can be in conversation with you.
The
And that
so
being
I guess
said,
that's it. Yeah,
that's it.
that's it. So good night, y'all. We're gonna stay in the streets. Folks gonna stay in the streets in LA, right? Resist ICE. They are
Yes.
not welcome here.
Yes.
And
Uphold.
they have no business here. We out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.